I came home to find an HOA Karen had parked 3 trucks inside my private garage without permission, so instead of arguing, I locked the door, made one phone call, and let the sheriff explain why trespassing on my property was a very bad idea. I knew something was wrong the moment my garage door wouldn't open all the way. The motor groaned, stopped halfway, then reversed like it had hit a wall. That didn't make sense. I'd left the garage empty that morning. No tools out. No storage boxes moved. Nothing. I stepped out of my truck and walked up the driveway, already irritated. When I hit the manual release and lifted the door myself, the reason revealed itself in one absurd, infuriating moment. 3 trucks. Not 1. Not 2. 3 full-size HOA maintenance trucks were parked neatly inside my private garage like it was some kind of community storage unit. They were positioned bumper to bumper, hazard lights off, keys gone. My tools had been pushed to the side. My workbench was partially blocked. One of the trucks had oil stains already forming on my concrete floor. I stood there in silence for a good 10 seconds, letting my brain catch up with my eyes. Then I laughed, short, sharp, disbelieving. Because there was only one person in this neighborhood arrogant enough to do something like this. Karen Whitfield, Vice President of the HOA. Self-appointed enforcer. The same woman who once tried to fine me for parking my own tractor too close to my own fence. The same woman who believed any space not actively defended belonged to the HOA by default. I pulled my phone out and checked my messages. Nothing. No notice. No emergency request. No explanation. Just trespass. I walked around the trucks, snapping photos from every angle. License plates. HOA decals. The way they'd shoved my equipment aside without permission. I documented everything calmly, methodically. Years of dealing with the HOA had taught me one thing. Evidence beats outrage every time. Then I did something Karen absolutely did not expect. I closed the garage door, locked it, and walked back into my house. I didn't touch the trucks. I didn't leave a note. I didn't call her. I didn't give her the confrontation she lived for. Instead, I made one quiet phone call, to the county sheriff's non-emergency line. My private garage has been trespassed, I told the dispatcher. 3 vehicles parked inside without permission. I've secured the property. I'd like an officer to come document it. The dispatcher paused. Inside your garage? Yes, ma'am. Another pause. Then, an officer will be dispatched. Took about 40 minutes. In that time, my phone started lighting up. First Karen. Then 2 HOA board members. Then a number I didn't recognize. Probably one of the maintenance supervisors suddenly realizing their trucks were missing. I ignored every single call. When the sheriff arrived, I walked him straight to the garage and opened the door. His eyebrows went up immediately. Well, he said slowly, that's impressive. I handed him my phone with the photos. No permission. No notice. No easement. This is my property. He nodded. Do you know who owns the vehicles? The HOA, I said. And I know exactly who ordered them parked here. The deputy sighed in a way that told me this wasn't his first HOA encounter. He radioed it in, documented the scene, and left a notice on the garage door for the vehicle owners to contact the sheriff's office. Am I allowed to keep the door locked? I asked. He smiled, just a little. You're under no obligation to provide access to trespassers. As long as the vehicles aren't damaged, you're fine. That was all I needed to hear. An hour later, Karen showed up. She marched up my driveway like she owned it, heels clicking, face red, phone in hand. I watched from my porch as she yanked uselessly on the locked garage handle. She spun around when she saw me. You can't do this, she shouted. Those are HOA vehicles. They're on my property, I replied calmly. Inside my garage. We needed the space temporarily, she snapped. The lot was full. So you broke into my garage? Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I'm calling the police, she said. I already did, I answered. They're expecting you. That's when her confidence cracked. Because for the first time, Karen wasn't dealing with a resident she could bully. She was dealing with a locked door, a sheriff's report, and the consequences of assuming she could take whatever she wanted. And this was only the beginning. It didn't take long for the situation to spiral. About 20 minutes after Karen realized the garage door wasn't magically going to open, an unfamiliar pickup rolled up behind her. Then another. HOA board members, summoned like backup dancers for a tantrum, started appearing one by one, whispering urgently and glancing at my locked garage like it was a ticking bomb. Karen was pacing now, phone pressed to her ear, voice rising with every step. "This is illegal," she snapped. "He's holding HOA property hostage." "Yes, inside his garage." "I don't care how it sounds, just get down here." I stayed on my porch, coffee in hand, saying nothing. That silence bothered her more than shouting ever could. One of the board members, a thin man named Rick who usually avoided conflict like it was contagious, approached me cautiously. "Hey," he said, forcing a smile. "Let's just talk this out, okay?" "I'm happy to talk," I replied. "After the sheriff finishes his report." Rick swallowed. "Karen says you locked them in on purpose." "I secured my property," I corrected. "After it was trespassed." Karen spun toward us. "You can't just lock HOA vehicles away. We have easement rights." I finally stood up. "Show me." She froze. "What?" "The easement. The document that says you can store vehicles inside my private garage." Her mouth tightened. "That's not how easements work." "Exactly," I said. At that moment, the sheriff's cruiser returned, slow, deliberate, and very visible. The deputy stepped out, took one look at the crowd, and sighed like a man who just walked into a mess he already understood. Karen rushed toward him immediately. "Officer, he's refusing to release HOA vehicles," she said breathlessly. "This is theft." The deputy didn't even look at me. "Ma'am, did you or someone acting on your behalf park those vehicles inside his garage without permission?" Karen hesitated. "Just a fraction of a second, but enough." "We needed temporary space," she said. "It's community business." The deputy nodded. "So you entered private property and stored vehicles without consent." That's trespassing," he finished. Rick visibly paled. Karen's voice sharpened. "So you're just going to let him keep them locked up?" The deputy finally turned to me. "Have the vehicles been damaged?" "No," I said. "They haven't been touched." "Then he's under no obligation to release them on your timeline," the deputy said calmly. "You'll need to coordinate removal once proper authorization and liability are addressed." "Liability?" Karen repeated. "Yes," he said. "Damage to property, unauthorized use, and potential charges if this escalates." The word charges landed like a dropped plate. Karen's confidence shattered. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice suddenly thinner. "We'll find him." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "Non-compliance." "With what lawful order?" he asked. Silence. Rick stepped in quickly. Okay, let's all just calm down. We'll sort this internally." But it was already too late for that. Because while they were arguing, something else had happened. The maintenance supervisor had arrived. He walked straight to the garage, recognized the trucks immediately, and his face drained of color. "Why are these here?" he demanded, turning to Karen. "We needed space," she snapped. "Why weren't you answering your phone?" He ignored her. "These trucks aren't supposed to be off-site. Insurance doesn't cover private storage. If something happens..." The deputy cleared his throat. "You'll want that sorted quickly." The supervisor rubbed his face. "We need to get them out today." "Not until I get written confirmation," I said, stepping forward. "And an acknowledgement of trespass, plus compensation for the oil stains." Karen whirled on me. "You're extorting us." "No," I replied evenly. "I'm protecting myself." The deputy nodded. "That's reasonable." That word, reasonable, was the nail in the coffin. Karen realized, far too late, that this wasn't a power play she could win. No fines. No intimidation. No public tantrum. Just locked doors, legal reality, and witnesses. By the time the HOA finally arranged written agreements, damage coverage, and a formal apology, yes, an actual apology, Karen looked like she'd aged 10 years. And as the trucks were driven out of my garage under the watchful eye of the sheriff, I could see it in her face. She hadn't just lost control of the situation. She'd lost control of the narrative. And HOA presidents don't survive that for long. By the next morning, the fallout had already begun. I knew because my phone buzzed before sunrise. 3 missed calls, all from different HOA numbers. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need to. The message had already been delivered loud and clear the day before. They didn't get to touch my property without consequences anymore. At 9 sharp, a certified letter arrived. Inside was a hastily written notice from the HOA's legal counsel requesting immediate cooperation and proposing a mutually agreeable resolution. Translation: Karen had finally realized this wasn't something she could scream her way out of. What she didn't realize was that the damage was already done. Word spreads fast in neighborhoods like ours. Faster than official notices. Faster than board meetings. By mid-morning, I had 3 neighbors stop by, not to complain, but to quietly thank me. One of them, an older guy named Samuel, shook his head and said, "She parked equipment in my driveway once. I didn't fight it. Wish I had." Another neighbor admitted Karen had threatened fines if anyone interfered with HOA operations. I listened. Took notes. Names. Date. Because something else had happened overnight, something Karen didn't anticipate. The sheriff's report had gone public record. And once that happened, the county took interest. Around noon, a white SUV with a county seal pulled up. 2 people stepped out. An insurance adjuster and a risk compliance officer contracted by the HOA's insurer. They weren't there for me. They were there because 3 uninsured, improperly stored vehicles had been placed on private property without authorization. That kind of mistake gets very expensive very fast. Karen arrived 15 minutes later, visibly shaken but still clinging to authority like a life raft. She tried to take charge immediately. "I'm the HOA vice president," she announced. "Any communication should go through me." The adjuster didn't even look up from his clipboard. "We're aware who authorized the storage." Karen stiffened. "Then you know it was necessary." The compliance officer finally looked at her. "We know it was a violation." That word hit her harder than any insult I could have thrown. Violation. They spent the next hour walking my garage, photographing oil stains, documenting displaced equipment, and reviewing the sheriff's note. I didn't interfere. I didn't exaggerate. I just answered questions honestly. When they were done, the adjuster closed his folder and sighed. "This incident triggers a policy review," he said. "If similar actions occurred elsewhere, coverage could be suspended." Karen's face went pale. "Suspended?" "Yes," he replied. "And fines issued." She turned to me then, eyes sharp, desperate. "You could have just unlocked the door. And you could have just asked," I said calmly. The compliance officer nodded. This situation escalated because boundaries were ignored. By late afternoon, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Not to discipline me. To discipline Karen. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. Rick called me afterward, his voice low and tired. "She's been stripped of enforcement authority," he said. "Pending further review." I leaned back in my chair. "That's so." "There were other complaints," he admitted. "Yours just made them impossible to ignore." The next week was quiet. Too quiet. No notices. No fines. No surprise inspections. The HOA trucks suddenly parked exactly where they were supposed to. Karen stopped walking the neighborhood entirely. Then the final piece fell into place. The HOA sent a formal letter. An apology. Signed by the board. It acknowledged unauthorized entry, improper use of private property, and confirmed that no future HOA activity would occur on my land without written consent. They even included a check for damages, cleaning, and inconvenience. I cashed it, because here's the thing about people like Karen: they rely on silence, on people backing down, on nobody calling their bluff. The moment you stop arguing and start documenting, their power evaporates. And while Karen was busy trying to save face, she missed the real loss. The neighborhood stopped fearing her. And once that happens, HOA tyrants don't last long. Because locked doors don't just protect property. They expose exactly who never had the right to walk in. Karen didn't resign right away. People like her never do. Instead, she tried to regain control quietly, behind emails, closed-door meetings, and carefully worded notices meant to remind everyone she was still important. But the problem with overplaying your hand is that once everyone sees it, you can't pretend it never happened. And now everyone was watching. A week after the garage incident, the HOA posted a routine compliance reminder on the community board. No fines, no threats, just vague language about cooperation and respect. If you knew Karen, you knew exactly who had written it, and exactly how badly she hated every word. That same afternoon, another neighbor knocked on my door. This time it was Lisa, who lived 3 houses down and had been quietly fighting the HOA for years over a fence line. She tried this on me too, Lisa said. Parked equipment on my property once. I didn't lock anything. I just complained. And, I asked, she fined me for obstruction. That was the moment I realized my situation wasn't isolated, it was a pattern. Within days, more stories surfaced. Unauthorized entries. Surprise inspections. Selective enforcement aimed only at people who pushed back. Karen hadn't just abused authority, she'd normalized it. And now, because of one locked garage and one sheriff's report, that normalization was cracking. The HOA's insurer followed up with a formal risk assessment. Then the county zoning office requested documentation related to HOA vehicle storage and operational boundaries. Then, quietly but decisively, the board scheduled a special closed session. Karen wasn't informed until the morning of. Rick called me afterward again, his voice lower than before. She's not handling this well. What does that mean? I asked. She's blaming everyone. The sheriff. The insurance company. You. I smiled faintly. Of course she is. At the closed session, the board reviewed documented complaints going back years. Not rumors. Not opinions. Paper trails. Emails. Witness statements. Photos. And right at the center of it all was a familiar theme: Karen assuming permission where none existed. The garage incident wasn't the worst thing she'd done. It was just the clearest. When Karen emerged from the meeting, neighbors said she looked furious, humiliated in a way no public argument could have achieved. She stormed past people without making eye contact. No speeches. No threats. No clipboard. 2 days later, her HOA email access was suspended. A week later, the board announced an interim restructuring to restore trust and transparency. Karen's name wasn't mentioned, but her authority was gone. The real turning point came when the HOA held an open forum, the kind Karen had avoided for years. Residents lined up, one by one, calmly sharing experiences. No yelling. No chaos. Just facts. By the end of the meeting, the board had no choice. Karen was removed from her position. Not voted out in dramatic fashion. Removed. And just like that, the woman who once parked 3 trucks in my garage without a second thought no longer had the power to tell anyone what to do. A few days later, I saw her for the last time. She was loading boxes into her SUV, jaw tight, eyes fixed forward. No wave. No confrontation. No final words. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked small. Because when authority is built on intimidation instead of respect, it collapses the moment someone locks a door and says, no. And Karen never recovered from that. But the story wasn't over yet. Because consequences don't stop at removal. Sometimes they follow you long after you lose the title. Life didn't explode after Karen was removed. It settled. And that, more than anything, told me how much damage she'd actually been doing all along. The HOA didn't disappear overnight, but it transformed into something almost unrecognizable. Notices became polite. Emails asked instead of demanded. Rules were clarified instead of weaponized. It was as if the entire neighborhood exhaled at once, realizing the tension they'd normalized didn't have to exist. For me, the changes were immediate. No more surprise visits. No routine inspections. No threatening letters slipped under my door. The silence wasn't ominous, it was respectful. A month after the garage incident, I received another letter from the HOA. This one wasn't legal language or damage control. It was an invitation. They wanted me to attend a meeting. Not as a defendant. As a contributor. I almost laughed when I read it. I didn't go, but I appreciated the irony. The same organization that once let a board member park 3 trucks in my garage without permission was now asking for my input on boundaries and enforcement policies. That told me everything I needed to know. Karen, on the other hand, didn't land so softly. I heard things secondhand. How she'd tried to frame her removal as political. How she blamed the board for being weak. How she told anyone who'd listen that I'd set her up. But stories change when facts exist. The sheriff's report didn't disappear. The insurance review didn't vanish. The written apology, signed by the board, was now part of HOA records. And once authority is stripped, all that's left is reputation. Hers didn't survive. A few weeks later, a for sale sign went up in her yard. No announcement. No farewell email. Just a quiet retreat. When the house sold, nobody protested. Nobody speculated loudly. People simply accepted it the way you accept the end of a bad season. I saw her once more before she left. She was standing in her driveway, watching movers load boxes. She looked thinner. Tired. Like someone who'd finally realized control isn't the same thing as respect. Our eyes met for a brief moment. She didn't glare. Didn't scowl. Didn't speak. She just looked away. And I understood something important right then. This had never been about trucks, or garages, or fines. It had been about boundaries. People like Karen thrive in gray areas, where politeness is mistaken for permission and silence is mistaken for consent. They rely on the idea that nobody wants conflict badly enough to stop them. All I did was lock a door. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't escalate. I documented. I waited. I let the system she thought she controlled do its job. And the system worked. In the months that followed, the HOA adopted new policies requiring written consent for any use of private property. Enforcement authority was split among multiple board members. Complaints had to be logged and reviewed, not acted on impulsively. The neighborhood became quieter, kinder, normal. Sometimes neighbors still bring up the garage incident like it's legend now. A story passed around during barbecues or mentioned with a grin when HOA emails hit inboxes. You remember when they locked the trucks in? Someone will say. And everyone laughs. But I don't laugh because it was funny. I laugh because it was effective. Because it proved something most people forget. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to dominate to be right. You just have to know where your line is, and refuse to let anyone cross it. My garage is empty now. Clean. Quiet. The door opens smoothly every time. And every time it does, I'm reminded that standing your ground doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a locked door, a calm voice, and the patience to let consequences do what intimidation never could. Because once someone shows you who they are when they think they own you, the smartest move isn't to argue. It's to make sure they never get inside again.